What have you seen from Bo Nix so far this year, second season as the team's quarterback, by way of growth and, more importantly, areas where he can still grow even more?
Yeah, I think a lot of the growth is stuff that's a little bit harder to put your finger on when you're watching a game. There was a play a couple weeks ago where he identified a nickel pressure coming at him, and it was RPO, but he pulled the ball. He just sort of abandoned it and threw the ball where he knew he was going to get to eventually. And that's just stuff that as you go through it and you play more and more, you get more efficient at doing. They're quicker in and out of the huddle. He's got a better command of the offense. It's sort of all the stuff that maybe doesn't show up in the stat line, but it makes the week a little bit easier. Maybe helps you expand your game plan a little bit. There have definitely been times where he's played inconsistent. He's turned the football over more so far this year than he did, generally speaking, last year. He had a couple of spates of turnovers last year. So he's definitely there's plenty to clean up. I don't think he would tell you that he's played a full game yet this year where he's really been on point the whole game. But, that's another sort of watermark Sunday against the Eagles. He had put them in position. He'd led some comebacks, some big comebacks last year. They get to the doorstep against Kansas City and the field goal gets blocked. They get to a position to tie the game against Cincinnati and they play for overtime instead of going for the win. He had engineered some of these fourth quarters as a rookie, but they never got over the top and actually won one of those games. So that's sort of I think that's a part of the development, is figuring out, how to get to the finish line in a game like that. He's still, there's plenty of room for growth, but he's definitely done good things early in the season.
Season started with a win over the Titans, and then they had two disappointing losses. One self-inflicted with the leverage call that happened on the final field goal, and then they lose again to the Chargers. What was the key to them putting that behind them and coming out with a very impressive Monday night performance against the Bengals?
Yeah, I think the key was just playing consistently offensively for the most part. In that Chargers game, they went 3 and out 7 times in 11 drives. So they're sort of up and down offensively. It's a little bit of a roller coaster. They either make it look really easy or they go through long stretches where they don't do anything offensively. And so that ability to lean on the clock, they did it against the Bengals. Obviously the Bengals are in pretty rough shape at this point. But to be able to take what they did against Cincinnati and replicate it on the road against a good team, obviously a team that has struggled more than I think a lot of people thought early in the season, even though they're 4-0 going into last week. But just the ability to stay on the field, find a way to get a first down, find a way to get off the field defensively. They've been sort of at the precipice of that several times and really hadn't done it in a clutch situation over the past couple of seasons. And so they've got one on the board now, and the demeanor here in England's been quite a bit different, I think, than it was before beating Philly.
One of the things that I like to focus on for all teams, even though it irritates their fan bases, the one thing that the fans don't want to think about, the one thing they'd rather not be reminded of, the one thing that could become the fatal flaw. Like, let's not talk about that, please. So talk to me about the thing with the Broncos. If I'm a Broncos fan and I'm staring at the ceiling at night, worrying about what could make things go sideways from this point forward, what would it be?
Well, I think that they're obviously very talented defensively, but there's a couple, if they lost an edge guy for any meaningful amount of time, I think you would see a different structure. You just have to play a little bit differently. And obviously they're going to face some good offenses here the rest of the season. And so in the division, that's the margin for error in the West is so small. Obviously you see the Chargers dealing with some injuries right now. They've lost 2 in a row, but generally speaking, the race is wide open. And when it is, you've got a chance every week, but there's not going to be many cakewalks in the division. So I think you're still dealing with a pretty fine margin. And then the other thing is they've had more than one really bad special teams moment already this year. Obviously the leverage penalty against Indianapolis, they gave up a 71-yard kick return week 1. Will Lutz missed a field goal, a 42-yarder in one of those losses on the road. And so they just have had, Darren Rizzi has a reputation of being a good special teams coach. Obviously he's worked a long time with Sean, but that's new kickoff rule. Some of the scenarios are different in special teams, and they haven't exactly aced those so far. So that's one of those where if you're talking about, late game situation, critical game situation, division games, there's some good special teams units in the West. And if the Broncos aren't up to snuff on that, then that's an area where they've already lost one game because of it. And so I don't think it's going out on a limb to say it could cost them a game in a tight race the second half of the season.
You mentioned earlier that blocked field goal last year at Kansas City. And as the Broncos were lining up, leading 18-17 to kick the field goal that gave them the final margin of 21-17, I'm thinking about the bookends of the Broncos having one side of the line caved in and the block happening, and the Eagles in their most recent home game blocking 2 field goals, including the one that went for a touchdown. It's like, what's going to happen here? And I think that's one of the exciting aspects of this season. We no longer regard field goals as automatic. And if I ever regarded it as less automatic than before, it was in that moment. I'm thinking, well, we're going to see another block here. And I just think the fact that they pulled that off is a little bit of a lift for the special teams.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a scenario. There was a scenario late in the win against the Titans, actually, week 1, where they went for it on a 4th and 8, leading by 8 with a couple of minutes left. They could have kicked a 54-yard field goal and made it a 2-possession game. And Sean Payton went for it on 4th and 8. And again, he said he had a play that he had conviction in, but he also mentioned the only way Tennessee, gets back in the game quickly is a block and a return for a score. And that sounded like a coach who's been burned by that before. Justin Simmons did it to him with the Broncos when Sean was in New Orleans. I think 2016, blocked a field goal that won a game. It happened in Kansas City last year. And so, even veteran coaches that have seen just about everything, they wear these scars. And certainly the kicking game, as Sean calls it, is the source of several of those scars. And it impacts what he does late in games at times.
You mentioned injuries earlier, and look, a rash of injuries can change anything. And you look at the upcoming games for the Broncos, there's a lot of potential wins there. Key guys start getting hurt, and maybe those wins aren't wins any longer. One guy who's had a history of injuries, it's been a great find so far this year, J.K. Dobbins. He's been as good at times. I mean, when they commit to the run, he's been as good as we've ever seen. And that was really a steal for the Broncos to get him for the contract they did at a time when he was available to anybody who wanted him. And the Broncos had the foresight that if this guy stays healthy, he can still be special.
Yeah, definitely. And part of their plan so far this season, I think, is trying to manage the season to where you're using him the way you want to use him and having him help you win games, and then also trying to keep him healthy for the stretch run. If he's effective for 14 weeks and he helps you get to the playoffs, that's great, but you want him available in December and January too. So, and the IR stint that he did with the Chargers last year was a knee injury that was late in the year after he had 220 some touches. And so they've really been cognizant of that. They're trying to bring the rookie RJ Harvey along. They're trying to sort of manage, I think, the workload a little bit for J.K. Dobbins, but they're going to get in a couple games here, whether it's Sunday against New York or against Dallas at home in a couple weeks, maybe against the Giants, have a good pass rush when they get back to Denver next weekend. There's going to be a game where you're going to have to decide, are we giving this guy the ball 27, 28 times and throwing it to him a couple times, or are we going to keep putting the rookie in the game? And so far, they've done a pretty good job, I think, of balancing that. Harvey played really well a couple weeks ago, didn't do much against the Eagles. So, yeah, Dobbins has been great. He's averaging well north of 5 a carry, and he's really changed. He's not only changed the complexion of what they can do at the running back position, but it's helped accentuate what we thought we already knew based on analytics, was that the Broncos have a good offensive line. Now that they've got a back that's sort of, maximizing what they're doing up front, you're sort of seeing the fruits of that labor of what they've built and developed up front too.
Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.